Welcome to The Winner's Voice, where timeless books inspire powerful minds and lasting success. Today, we begin Pushing to the Front by Orison Swett Marden, a classic work filled with powerful ideas on mindset, growth, and success. This is Part 8. Let's begin. Chapter 39. One Unwavering Aim. Life is an arrow, therefore you must know what mark to aim at, how to use the bow. Then draw it to the head and let it go. Henry Van Dyke. The important thing in life is to have a great aim and to possess the aptitude and perseverance to attain it. Goethe. A double-minded man is unstable in all his ways. Let every one ascertain his special business and calling, and then stick to it if he would be successful. Franklin. Why do you lead such a solitary life? Asked a friend of Michelangelo. Art is a jealous mistress, replied the artist. She requires the whole man. During his labors at the Sistine Chapel, according to Disraeli, he refused to meet anyone, even at his own house. This day we sailed westward, which was our course, were the simple but grand words which Columbus wrote in his journal day after day. Hope might rise and fall, terror and dismay might seize upon the crew at the mysterious variations of the compass, but Columbus, unappalled, pushed due west and nightly added to his record the above words. "Cut an inch deeper," said a member of the old guard to the surgeon probing his wound, "and you will find the emperor," meaning his heart. By the marvelous power of concentrated purpose Napoleon had left his name on the very stones of the Capitol, had burned it indelibly into the heart of every Frenchman, and had left it written in living letters all over Europe. France today has not shaken off the spell of that name. In the fair city on the Seine the mystic N confronts you everywhere. Oh, the power of a great purpose to work miracles! It has changed the face of the world. Napoleon knew that there were plenty of great men in France, but they did not know the might of the unwavering aim by which he was changing the destinies of Europe. He saw that what was called the balance of power was only an idle dream, that, unless some mastermind could be found which was a match for events, the millions would rule in anarchy. His iron will grasped the situation, and like William Pitt, he did not loiter around balancing the probabilities of failure or success, or dally with his purpose. There was no turning to the right nor to the left, no dreaming away time, nor building air castles, but one look and purpose, forward, upward, and onward, straight to his goal. His great success in war was due largely to his definiteness of aim. He always hit the bullseye. He was like a great burning glass, concentrating the rays of the sun upon a single spot. He burned a hole wherever he went. After finding the weak place in the enemy's ranks, he would mass his men and hurl them like an avalanche upon the critical point, crowding volley upon volley, charge upon charge, till he made a breach. What a lesson of the power concentration there is in this man's life! To succeed today, a man must concentrate all the faculties of his mind upon one unwavering aim, and have a tenacity of purpose which means death or victory. Every other inclination which tempts him from his aim must be suppressed. A man may starve on a dozen half-learned trades or occupations. He may grow rich and famous upon one trade thoroughly mastered, even though it be the humblest. Even Gladstone, with his ponderous yet active brain, said he could not do two things at once. He threw his entire strength upon whatever he did. The intensest energy characterized everything he undertook, even his recreation. If such concentration of energy is necessary for the success of a Gladstone, what can we common mortals hope to accomplish by scatteration? All great men have been noted for their power of concentration, which makes them oblivious of everything outside their aim. Victor Hugo wrote his Notre Dame during the Revolution of 1830, while the bullets were whistling across his garden. He shut himself up in one room, locking his clothes up in another, lest they should tempt him to go out into the street, and spent most of that winter wrapped in a big gray comforter, pouring his very life into his work. Abraham Lincoln possessed such power of concentration that he could repeat quite correctly a sermon to which he had listened in his boyhood. A New York sportsman, in answer to an advertisement, sent 25 cents for a sure receipt to prevent a shotgun from scattering, and received the following: "Dear Sir, to keep a gun from scattering put in but a single shot. It is the men who do one thing in this world who come to the front." Who is the favorite actor? It is a Jefferson, who devotes a lifetime to a Rip Van Winkle, a Booth, an Irving, a Keene, who plays one character until he can play it better than any other man living, and not the shallow players who impersonate all parts. The great man is the one who never steps outside of his specialty or dissipates his individuality. It is an Edison, a Morse, a Bell, a Howe, a Stevenson, a Watt. It is an Adam Smith, spending 10 years on the wealth of nations. It is a Gibbon, giving 20 years to his Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire. It is a Hume, writing 13 hours a day on his History of England. It is a Webster, spending 36 years on his dictionary. It is a Bancroft, working 26 years on his History of the United States. It is a Field, crossing the ocean 50 times to lay a cable, while the world ridicules. It is a Newton, writing his Chronology of Ancient Nations 16 times. A one-talent man who decides upon a definite object accomplishes more than a 10-talent man who scatters his energies and never knows exactly what he will do. The weakest living creature, by concentrating his powers upon one thing, can accomplish something. The strongest, by dispersing his over many, may fail to accomplish anything. A great purpose is cumulative, and, like a great magnet, it attracts all that is kindred along the stream of life. Joseph Jefferson. A Yankee can splice a rope in many different ways. An English sailor only knows one way, but that is the best one. It is the one-sided man, the sharp-eyed man, the man of single and intense purpose, the man of one idea, who cuts his way through obstacles and forges to the front. The time has gone forever when a Bacon can span universal knowledge, or when, absorbing all the knowledge of the times, a Dante can sustain arguments against 14 disputants in the University of Paris and conquer in them all. The day when a man can successfully drive a dozen callings abreast is a thing of the past. Concentration is the keynote of the century. Scientists estimate that there is energy enough in less than 50 acres of sunshine to run all the machinery in the world, if it could be concentrated. But the sun might blaze out upon the earth forever without setting anything on fire, although these rays focused by a burning glass would melt solid granite, or even change a diamond into vapor. There are plenty of men who have ability enough. The rays of their faculties, taken separately, are all right, but they are powerless to collect them, to bring them all to bear upon a single spot. Versatile men, universal geniuses, are usually weak, because they have no power to concentrate their talents upon one point, and this makes all the difference between success and failure. Chiseled upon the tomb of a disappointed, heartbroken king, Joseph II. Of Austria, in the royal cemetery at Vienna, a traveler tells us, is this epitaph: "Here lies a monarch who, with the best of intentions, never carried out a single plan." Sir James Mackintosh was a man of remarkable ability. He excited in every one who knew him the greatest expectations. Many watched his career with much interest, expecting that he would dazzle the world, but there was no purpose in his life. He had intermittent attacks of enthusiasm for doing great things, but his zeal all evaporated before he could decide what to do. This fatal defect in his character kept him balancing between conflicting motives, and his whole life was almost thrown away. He lacked power to choose one object and persevere with a single aim, sacrificing every interfering inclination. He, for instance, vacillated for weeks trying to determine whether to use usefulness or utility in a composition. One talent utilized in a single direction will do infinitely more than 10 talents scattered. A thimbleful of powder behind a ball in a rifle will do more execution than a carload of powder unconfined. The rifle barrel is the purpose that gives direct aim to the powder, which otherwise, no matter how good it might be, would be powerless. The poorest scholar in school or college often, in practical life, far outstrips the class leader or senior wrangler, simply because what little ability he has he employs for a definite object, while the other, depending upon his general ability and brilliant prospects, never concentrates his powers. It is fashionable to ridicule the man of one idea, but the men who have changed the front of the world have been men of a single aim. No man can make his mark on this age of specialties who is not a man of one idea, one supreme air, one master passion. The man who would make himself felt on this bustling planet, who would make a breach in the compact conservatism of our civilization, must play all his guns on one point. A wavering aim, a faltering purpose, has no place in the 20th century. Mental shiftlessness is the cause of many a failure. The world is full of unsuccessful men who spend their lives letting empty buckets down into empty wells. "Mr. A. often laughs at me," said a young American chemist, "because I have but one idea. He talks about everything, aims to excel in many things, but I have learned that, if I ever wish to make a breach, I must play my guns continually upon one point." This great chemist, when an obscure schoolmaster, used to study by the light of a pine not in a log cabin. Not many years later, he was performing experiments in electromagnetism before English earls, and subsequently, he was at the head of one of the largest scientific institutes of this country. He was the late Professor Henry, of the Smithsonian Institution, Washington. "We should guard against a talent which we cannot hope to practice in perfection," says Goethe. "Improve it as we may, we shall always, in the end, when the merit of the matter has become apparent to us, painfully lament the loss of time and strength devoted to such botching." An old proverb says, "The master of one trade will support a wife and 7 children, and the master of 7 will not support himself." It is the single aim that wins. Men with monopolizing ambitions rarely live in history. They do not focus their powers long enough to burn their names indelibly into the roll of honor. Edward Everett, even with his magnificent powers, disappointed the expectations of his friends. He spread himself over the whole field of knowledge and elegant culture, but the mention of the name of Everett does not call up any one great achievement as does that of names like Garrison and Phillips. Voltaire called the Frenchman La Harpe an oven which was always heating, but which never cooked anything. Hartley Coleridge was splendidly endowed with talent, but there was one fatal lack in his character. He had no definite purpose, and his life was a failure. Unstable as water, he could not excel. Southey, the uncle of Coleridge, says of him, "Coleridge has 2 left hands." He was so morbidly shy from living alone in his dreamland that he could not open a letter without trembling. He would often rally from his purposeless life, and resolve to redeem himself from the oblivion he saw staring him in the face, but, like Sir James Mackintosh, he remained a man of promise merely to the end of his life. The man who succeeds has a program. He fires his course and adheres to it. He lays his plans and executes them. He goes straight to his goal. He is not pushed this way, and that every time a difficulty is thrown in his path, if he cannot get over it, he goes through it. Constant and steady use of the faculties under a central purpose gives strength and power, while the use of faculties without an aim or end only weakens them. The mind must be focused on a definite end, or, like machinery without a balance wheel, it will rack itself to pieces. This age of concentration calls, not for educated men merely, not for talented men, not for geniuses, not for jacks of all trades, but for men who are trained to do one thing as well as it can be done. Napoleon could go through the drill of his soldiers better than any one of his men. Stick to your aim. The constant changing of one's occupation is fatal to all success. After a young man has spent 5 or 6 years in a dry goods store, he concludes that he would rather sell groceries, thereby throwing away 5 years of valuable experience which will be of very little use to him in the grocery business, and so he spends a large part of his life drifting around from one kind of employment to another, learning part of each but all of none, forgetting that experience is worth more to him than money, and that the years devoted to learning his trade or occupation are the most valuable. Half-learned trades, no matter if a man has 20, will never give him a good living, much less a competency, while wealth is absolutely out of the question. How many young men fail to reach the point of efficiency in one line of work before they get discouraged and venture into something else? How easy to see the thorns in one's own profession or vocation, and only the roses in that of another. A young man in business, for instance, seeing a physician riding about town in his carriage, visiting his patients, imagines that a doctor must have an easy, ideal life, and wonders that he himself should have embarked in an occupation so full of disagreeable drudgery and hardships. He does not know of the years of dry, tedious study which the physician has consumed, the months and perhaps years of waiting for patients, the dry detail of anatomy, the endless names of drugs and technical terms. There is a sense of great power in a vocation after a man has reached the point of efficiency in it, the point of productiveness, the point where his skill begins to tell and brings in returns. Up to this point of efficiency, while he is learning his trade, the time seems to have been almost thrown away. But he has been storing up a vast reserve of knowledge of detail, laying foundations, forming his acquaintances, gaining his reputation for truthfulness, trustworthiness, and integrity, and in establishing his credit. When he reaches this point of efficiency, all the knowledge and skill, character, influence, and credit thus gained come to his aid, and he soon finds that in what seemed almost thrown away lies the secret of his prosperity. The credit he established as a clerk, the confidence, the integrity, the friendships formed, he finds equal to a large capital when he starts out for himself and takes the highway to fortune, while the young man who half learned several trades, got discouraged and stopped just short of the point of efficiency, just this side of success, is a failure because he didn't go far enough. He did not press on to the point at which his acquisition would have been profitable. In spite of the fact that nearly all very successful men have made a life work of one thing, we see on every hand hundreds of young men and women flitting about from occupation to occupation, trade to trade, in one thing today and another tomorrow, just as though they could go from one thing to another by turning a switch, as though they could run as well on another track as on the one they have left, regardless of the fact that no two careers have the same gauge, that every man builds his own road upon which another man's engine cannot run either with speed or safety. This fickleness, this disposition to shift about from one occupation to another, seems to be peculiar to American life, so much so that, when a young man meets a friend whom he has not seen for some time, the commonest question to ask is, "What are you doing now?" showing the improbability or uncertainty that he is doing today what he was doing when they last met. Some people think that if they keep everlastingly at it, they will succeed, but this is not always so. Working without a plan is as foolish as going to sea without a compass. A ship which has broken its rudder in mid-ocean may keep everlastingly at it, may keep on a full head of steam, driving about all the time, but it never arrives anywhere, it never reaches any port unless by accident, and if it does find a haven, its cargo may not be suited to the people, the climate, or conditions. The ship must be directed to a definite port, for which its cargo is adapted, and where there is a demand for it, and it must aim steadily for that port through sunshine and storm, through tempest and fog. So a man who would succeed must not drift about rudderless on the ocean of life. He must not only steer straight toward his destined port when the ocean is smooth, when the currents and winds serve, but he must keep his course in the very teeth of the wind and the tempest, and even when enveloped in the fogs of disappointment and mists of opposition. Atlantic liners do not stop for fogs or storms. They plow straight through the rough seas with only one thing in view, their destined port, and no matter what the weather is, no matter what obstacles they encounter, their arrival in port can be predicted to within a few hours. On the prairies of South America there grows a flower that always inclines in the same direction. If a traveler loses his way and has neither compass nor chart, by turning to this flower he will find a guide on which he can implicitly rely, for no matter how the rains descend or the winds blow, its leaves point to the north. So there are many men whose purposes are so well known, whose aims are so constant, that no matter what difficulties they may encounter, or what opposition they may meet, you can tell almost to a certainty where they will come out. They may be delayed by headwinds and countercurrents, but they will always head for the port and will steer straight towards the harbor. You know to a certainty that whatever else they may lose, they will not lose their compass or rudder. Whatever may happen to a man of this stamp, even though his sails may be swept away and his mast stripped to the deck, though he may be wrecked by the storms of life, the needle of his compass will still point to the North Star of his hope. Whatever comes, his life will not be purposeless. Even a wreck that makes its port is a greater success than a full-rigged ship with all its sails flying, with every mast and every rope intact, which merely drifts along into an accidental harbor. To fix a wandering life and give it direction is not an easy task, but a life which has no definite aim is sure to be frittered away in empty and purposeless dreams. Listless triflers, busy idlers, purposeless busybodies, are seen everywhere. A healthy, definite purpose is a remedy for 1,000 ills which attend aimless lives. Discontent and dissatisfaction flee before a definite purpose. What we do begrudgingly without a purpose becomes a delight with one, and no work is well done nor healthily done which is not enthusiastically done. Mere energy is not enough, it must be concentrated on some steady, unwavering aim. What is more common than unsuccessful geniuses, or failures with commanding talents? Indeed, the term unrewarded genius has become a proverb. Every town has unsuccessful educated and talented men. But education is of no value, talent is worthless, unless it can do something, achieve something. Men who can do something at everything and a very little at anything are not wanted in this age. What this age wants is young men and women who can do one thing without losing their identity or individuality, or becoming narrow, cramped, or dwarfed. Nothing can take the place of an all-absorbing purpose. Education cannot, genius cannot, talent cannot, industry cannot, willpower cannot. The purposeless life must ever be a failure. What good are powers, faculties, unless we can use them for a purpose? What good would a chest of tools do a carpenter unless he could use them? A college education, a head full of knowledge, are worth little to the men who cannot use them to some definite end. The man without a purpose never leaves his mark upon the world. He has no individuality. He is absorbed in the mass, lost in the crowd, weak, wavering, and incompetent. "Consider, my lord," said Rowland Hill to the Prime Minister of England, "that a letter to Ireland and the answer back would cost thousands upon thousands of my affectionate countrymen more than a fifth of their week's wages. If you shut the post office to them, which you do now, you shut out warm hearts and generous affections from home, kindred, and friends." The lad learned that it cost to carry a letter from London to Edinburgh 404 miles, 1/18th of a cent, while the government charged for a simple folded sheet of paper 28 cents, and twice as much if there was the smallest enclosure. Against the opposition and contempt of the Post Office Department, he at length carried his point, and on January 10, 1840, penny postage was established throughout Great Britain. Mr. Hill was chosen to introduce the system, at a salary of £1,500 a year. His success was most encouraging, but at the end of 2 years a Tory minister dismissed him without paying for his services, as agreed. The public was indignant, and at once contributed $65,000, and, at the request of Queen Victoria, Parliament voted him $100,000 cash, together with $10,000 a year for life. It is a great purpose which gives meaning to life. It unifies all our powers, binds them together in one cable, and makes strong and united what was weak, separated, scattered. Smatterers are weak and superficial. Of what use is a man who knows a little of everything and not much of anything? It is the momentum of constantly repeated acts that tells the story. Let thine eyes look straight before thee. Ponder the path of thy feet, and let all thy ways be established. Turn not to the right hand, nor to the left. One great secret of St. Paul's power lay in his strong purpose. Nothing could daunt, nothing intimidate him. The Roman emperor could not muzzle him, the dungeon could not appall him, no prison suppress him, obstacles could not discourage him. "This one thing I do," was written all over his work. The quenchless zeal of his mighty purpose burned its way down through the centuries, and its contagion will never cease to fire the hearts of men. "Try and come home, somebody," said his mother to Gambetta as she sent him off to Paris to school. Poverty pinched this lad hard in his little garret study, and his clothes were shabby, but what of that? He had made up his mind to get on in the world. For years he was chained to his desk and worked like a hero. At last his opportunity came. Jules Favre was to plead a great cause on a certain day, but being ill, he chose this young man, absolutely unknown, rough and uncouth, to take his place. For many years Gambetta had been preparing for such an opportunity, and he was equal to it. He made one of the greatest speeches that up to that time had ever been made in France. That night all the papers in Paris were sounding the praises of this ragged, uncouth Bohemian, and soon all France recognized him as the Republican leader. This sudden rise was not due to luck or accident. He had been steadfastly working and fighting his way up against oppositions and poverty for just such an occasion. Had he not been equal to it, it would only have made him ridiculous. What a stride! Yesterday, poor and unknown, living in a garret; today, deputy-elect, in the city of Marseilles, and the great Republican leader. When Louis Napoleon had been defeated at Sedan and had delivered his sword to William of Prussia, and when the Prussian army was marching on Paris, the brave Gambetta went out of the besieged city in a balloon barely grazed by the Prussian guns, landed in Amiens, and by almost superhuman skill raised 3 armies of 800,000 men, provided for their maintenance, and directed their military operations. A German officer said, "This colossal energy is the most remarkable event of modern history, and will carry down Gambetta's name to remote posterity." This youth, who was poring over his books in an attic while other youths were promenading the Champs-Élysées, although but 32 years old, was now virtually dictator of France, and the greatest orator in the Republic. What a striking example of the great reserve of personal power, which, even in dissolute lives, is sometimes called out by a great emergency or sudden sorrow, and ever after leads the life to victory. When Gambetta found that his first speech had electrified all France, his great reserve rushed to the front. He was suddenly weaned from dissipation, and resolved to make his mark in the world. Nor did he lose his head in his quick leap into fame. He still lived in the upper room in the musty Latin Quarter, and remained a poor man, without stain of dishonor, though he might easily have made himself a millionaire. When he died, the Figaro said, "The Republic has lost its greatest man." American boys should study this great man, for he loved our country, and took our Republic as the pattern for France. There is no grander sight in the world than that of a young man fired with a great purpose, dominated by one unwavering aim. He is bound to win. The world stands to one side and lets him pass. It always makes way for the man with a will in him. He does not have one half the opposition to overcome that the undecided, purposeless man has who, like driftwood, runs against all sorts of snags to which he must yield simply because he has no momentum to force them out of his way. What a sublime spectacle it is to see a youth going straight to his goal, cutting his way through difficulties, and surmounting obstacles which dishearten others, as though they were but stepping stones. Defeat, like a gymnasium, only gives him new power. Opposition only doubles his exertions. Dangers only increase his courage. No matter what comes to him, sickness, poverty, disaster, he never turns his eye from his goal. Duos que sequitur lepores, neutrum capit. Chapter 40. Work and Wait. What we do upon some great occasion will probably depend on what we already are, and what we are will be the result of previous years of self-disciplined. H. P. Liddon. I consider a human soul without education like marble in a quarry, which shows none of its inherent beauties until the skill of the polisher sketches out the colors, makes the surface shine, and discovers every ornamental cloud, spot, and vein that runs throughout the body of it. Addison. Use your gifts faithfully, and they shall be enlarged. Practice what you know, and you shall attain to higher knowledge. Arnold. Haste trips up its own heels, fetters and stops itself. Seneca. The more you know, the more you can save yourself and that which belongs to you, and do more work with less effort. Charles Kingsley. I was a mere cipher in that vast sea of human enterprise, said Henry Bessemer, speaking of his arrival in London in 1831. Although but 18 years old, and without an acquaintance in the city, he soon made work for himself by inventing a process of copying bas-reliefs on cardboard. His method was so simple that one could learn in 10 minutes how to make a die from an embossed stamp for a penny. Having ascertained later that in this way the raised stamps on all official papers in England could easily be forged, he set to work and invented a perforated stamp which could not be forged nor removed from a document. At the public stamp office he was told by the chief that the government was losing £100,000 a year through the custom of removing stamps from old parchments and using them again. The chief also fully appreciated the new danger of easy counterfeiting. So he offered Bessemer a definite sum for his process of perforation, or an office for life at £800 a year. Bessemer chose the office, and hastened to tell the good news to a young woman with whom he had agreed to share his fortune. In explaining his invention, he told how it would prevent anyone from taking a valuable stamp from a document 100 years old and using it a second time. Yes, said his betrothed, I understand that, but surely, if all stamps had a date put upon them, they could not at a future time be used without detection. This was a very short speech, and of no special importance if we omit a single word of 4 letters, but, like the schoolboy's pins which saved the lives of thousands of people annually by not getting swallowed, that little word, by keeping out of the ponderous minds of the British revenue officers, had for a long period saved the government the burden of caring for an additional income of £100,000 a year. And the same little word, if published in its connection, would render Bessemer's perforation device of far less value than a last year's bird's nest. He felt proud of the young woman's ingenuity, and promptly suggested the improvement at the stamp office. As a result, his system of perforation was abandoned, and he was deprived of his promised office, the government coolly making use from that day to this, without compensation, of the idea conveyed by that little insignificant word. So Bessemer's financial prospects were not very encouraging, but realizing that the best capital a young man can have is a capital wife, he at once entered into a partnership which placed at his command the combined ideas of 2 very level heads. The result, after years of thought and experiment, was the Bessemer process of making steel cheaply, which has revolutionized the iron industry throughout the world. His method consists simply in forcing hot air from below into several tons of melted pig iron, so as to produce intense combustion, and then adding enough Spiegeleisen, looking-glass iron, N or rich in carbon, to change the whole mass to steel. He discovered this simple process only after trying in vain much more difficult and expensive methods. All things come round to him who will but wait. The great lack of the age is want of thoroughness. How seldom you find a young man or woman who is willing to take time to prepare for his life work. A little education is all they want, a little smattering of books, and then they are ready for business. Can't wait is characteristic of the century, and is written on everything, on commerce, on schools, on society, on churches. Can't wait for a high school, seminary, or college. The boy can't wait to become a youth, nor the youth a man. Youth rush into business with no great reserve of education or drill. Of course they do poor, feverish work, and break down in middle life, and many die of old age in the 40s. Everybody is in a hurry. Buildings are rushed up so quickly that they will not stand, and everything is made to sell. Not long ago, a professor in one of our universities had a letter from a young woman in the West, asking him if he did not think she could teach elocution if she could come to the university and take 12 lessons. Our young people of today are not willing to lay broad, deep foundations. The weary years in preparatory school and college dishearten them. They only want a smattering of an education. But as Pope says, a little learning is a dangerous thing. Drink deep, or taste not the Pyrean spring. Their shallow draughts intoxicate the brain, and drinking largely sobers us again. The shifts to cover up ignorance, and the constant trembling lest some blunder should expose one's emptiness, are pitiable. Short-cuts and abridged methods are the demand of the hour. But the way to shorten the road to success is to take plenty of time to lay in your reserve power. Hard work, a definite aim, and faithfulness will shorten the way. Don't risk a life's superstructure upon a day's foundation. Patience is nature's motto. She works ages to bring a flower to perfection. What will she not do for the greatest of her creation? Ages and eons are nothing to her. Out of them she has been carving her great statue, a perfect man. Johnson said a man must turn over half a library to write one book. When an authoress told Wordsworth she had spent 6 hours on a poem, he replied that he would have spent 6 weeks. Think of Bishop Hall spending 30 years on one of his works. Owens was working on the commentary to the Epistle to the Hebrews for 20 years. Moore spent several weeks on one of his musical stanzas, which reads as if it were a dash of genius. Carlyle wrote with the utmost difficulty and never executed a page of his great histories till he had consulted every known authority, so that every sentence is the quintessence of many books, the product of many hours of drudging research in the great libraries. Today, Sartor Resartus is everywhere. You can get it for a mere trifle at almost any booksellers, and hundreds of thousands of copies are scattered over the world. But when Carlyle brought it to London in 1851, it was refused almost contemptuously by 3 prominent publishers. At length he managed to get it into Fraser's Magazine, the editor of which conveyed to the author the pleasing information that his work had been received with unqualified disapprobation. Henry Ward Beecher sent half a dozen articles to the publisher of a religious paper to pay for his subscription, but they were respectfully declined. The publishers of the Atlantic Monthly returned Miss Alcott's manuscript, suggesting that she had better stick to teaching. One of the leading magazines ridiculed Tennyson's first poems, and consigned the young poet to temporary oblivion. Only one of Ralph Waldo Emerson's books had a remunerative sale. Washington Irving was nearly 70 years old before the income from his books paid the expenses of his household. In some respects, it is very unfortunate that the old system of binding boys out to a trade has been abandoned. Today, very few boys learn any trade. They pick up what they know as they go along, just as a student crams for a particular examination, just to get through, without any effort to see how much he may learn on any subject. Think of an American youth spending 10 years with Da Vinci on the model of an equestrian statue that he might master the anatomy of the horse. Most young American artists would expect, in a quarter of that time, to sculpture an Apollo Belvedere. A rich man asked Howard Burnett to do a little something for his album. Burnett complied and charged 1,000 francs. "But it took you only 5 minutes," objected the rich man. "Yes, but it took me 30 years to learn how to do it in 5 minutes." What the age wants is men who have the nerve and the grit to work and wait, whether the world applaud or hiss. A Mirabeau, who can struggle on for 40 years before he has a chance to show the world his vast reserve, destined to shake an empire. A Farragut, a von Moltke, who have the persistence to work and wait for half a century for their first great opportunities. A Grant, fighting on in heroic silence, when denounced by his brother generals and politicians everywhere. A Michelangelo, working 7 long years decorating the Sistine Chapel with his matchless creation and the Last Judgment, refusing all remuneration therefor, lest his pencil might catch the taint of avarice. A Thurlow Weed, walking 2 miles through the snow with rags tied around his feet for shoes, to borrow the history of the French Revolution, and eagerly devouring it before the sapbush fire. A Milton, elaborating Paradise Lost, in a world he could not see. A Thackeray, struggling on cheerfully after. His Vanity Fair was refused by a dozen publishers. A Balzac, toiling and waiting in a lonely garret. Men whom neither poverty, debt, nor hunger could discourage or intimidate, not daunted by privations, not hindered by discouragements. It wants men who can work and wait. When a young lawyer, Daniel Webster, once looked in vain through all the law libraries near him, and then ordered at an expense of $50 the necessary books, to obtain authorities and precedents in a case in which his client was a poor blacksmith. He won his case, but, on account of the poverty of his client, only charged $15, thus losing heavily on the books bought, to say nothing of his time. Years after, as he was passing through New York City, he was consulted by Aaron Burr on an important but puzzling case then pending before the Supreme Court. He saw in a moment that it was just like the blacksmith's case, an intricate question of title, which he had solved so thoroughly that it was to him now as simple as the multiplication table. Going back to the time of Charles II, he gave the law and precedents involved with such readiness and accuracy of sequence that Burr asked in great surprise if he had been consulted before in the case. "Most certainly not," he replied. "I never heard of your case till this evening." "Very well," said Burr, "proceed," and, when he had finished, Webster received a fee that paid him liberally for all the time and trouble he had spent for his early client. Albert Bierstadt first crossed the Rocky Mountains with a band of pioneers in 1859, making sketches for the paintings of Western scenes for which he had become famous. As he followed the trail to Pike's Peak, he gazed in wonder upon the enormous herds of buffaloes which dotted the plains as far as the eye could reach, and thought of the time when they would have disappeared before the march of civilization. The thought haunted him and found its final embodiment in The Last of the Buffaloes in 1890. To perfect this great work he had spent 20 years. Everything which endures, which will stand the test of time, must have a deep, solid foundation. In Rome, the foundation is often the most expensive part of an edifice, so deep must they dig to build on the living rock. 50 feet of Bunker Hill Monument is underground, unseen and unappreciated by those who tread about that historic shaft, but it is this foundation, apparently thrown away, which enables it to stand upright, true to the plumb line through all the tempests that lash its granite sides. A large part of every successful life must be spent in laying foundation stones underground. Success is the child of drudgery and perseverance and depends upon knowing how long it takes to succeed. Endurance is a much better test of character than any one act of heroism, however noble. The pianist Thalberg said he never ventured to perform one of his celebrated pieces in public until he had played it at least 1,500 times. He laid no claim whatever to genius. He said it was all a question of hard work. The accomplishments of such industry, such perseverance, would put to shame many a man who claims genius. Before Edmund Kean would consent to appear in that character which he acted with such consummate skill, the gentleman villain, he practiced constantly before a glass, studying expression for a year and a half. When he appeared upon the stage, Byron, who went with Moore to see him, said he never looked upon so fearful and wicked a face. As the great actor went on to delineate the terrible consequences of sin, Byron fainted. "For years I was in my place of business by sunrise," said a wealthy banker who had begun without $1, "and often I did not leave it for 15 or 18 hours. Patience, it is said, changes the mulberry leaf to satin." The giant oak on the hillside was detained months or years in its upward growth while its root took a great turn around some rock, in order to gain a hold by which the tree was anchored to withstand the storms of centuries. Da Vinci spent 4 years on the head of Mona Lisa, perhaps the most beautiful ever painted, but he left therein an artistic thought for all time. Said Captain Bingham, "You can have no idea of the wonderful machine that the German army is and how well it is prepared for war. A chart is made out which shows just what must be done in the case of wars with the different nations, and every officer's place in the scheme is laid out beforehand. There is a schedule of trains which will supersede all other schedules the moment war is declared, and this is so arranged that the commander of the army here could telegraph to any officer to take such a train and go to such a place at a moment's notice." A learned clergyman was thus accosted by an illiterate preacher who despised education. "Sir, you have been to college, I presume?" "Yes, sir," was the reply. "I am thankful," said the former, "that the Lord opened my mouth without any learning." "A similar event," retorted the clergyman, "happened in Balaam's time. A young man just graduated told the president of Trinity College that he had completed his education and had come to say good-bye. "Indeed," said the president, "I have just begun my education." Many an extraordinary man has been made out of a very ordinary boy, but in order to accomplish this we must begin with him while he is young. It is simply astonishing what training will do for a rough, uncouth, and even dull lad, if he has good material in him, and comes under the tutelage of a skilled educator before his habits become fixed or confirmed. Even a few weeks or months' drill of the rawest and roughest recruits in the late Civil War so straightened and dignified stooping and uncouth soldiers, and made them manly, erect, and courteous in their bearing, that their own friends scarcely knew them. If this change is so marked in the youth who has grown to maturity, what a miracle is possible in the lad who is taken early and put under a course of drill and systematic training, both physical, mental, and moral? How often a man who is in the penitentiary, in the poorhouse, or among the tramps, or living out a miserable existence in the slums of our cities, rough, slovenly, has slumbering within the rags possibilities which would have developed him into a magnificent man, an ornament to the human race instead of a foul blot and ugly scar, had he only been fortunate enough early in life to have enjoyed the benefits of efficient and systematic training. Laziness begins in cobwebs and ends in iron chains. Edison described his repeated efforts to make the phonograph reproduce an aspirated sound, and added, "From 18 to 20 hours a day for the last 7 months I have worked on this single word, specia. I said into the phonograph, specia, 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 but the instrument responded, picia, picia, picia." It was enough to drive one mad. But I held firm, and I have succeeded. The road to distinction must be paved with years of self-denial and hard work. Horace Mann, the great author of the Common School System of Massachusetts, was a remarkable example of that pluck and patience which can work and wait. His only inheritance was poverty and hard work. But he had an unquenchable thirst for knowledge and a determination to get on in the world. He braided straw to earn money to buy books for which his soul thirsted. Gladstone was bound to win. Although he had spent many years of preparation for his life work, in spite of the consciousness of marvelous natural endowments which would have been deemed sufficient by many young men, and notwithstanding he had gained the coveted prize of a seat in Parliament, yet he decided to make himself master of the situation, and amid all his public and private duties, he not only spent 11 terms more in the study of the law, but also studied Greek constantly and read every well-written book or paper he could obtain. So determined was he that his life should be rounded out to its fullest measure, and that his mind should have broad and liberal culture. Old Bull said, "If I practice 1 day, I can see the result. If I practice 2 days, my friends can see it. If I practice 3 days, the great public can see it." The habit of seizing every bit of knowledge, no matter how insignificant it may seem at the time, every opportunity, every occasion, and grinding them all up into experience, cannot be overestimated. You will find use for all of it. Webster once repeated with effect an anecdote which he had heard 14 years before, and which he had not thought of in the meantime. It exactly fitted the occasion. It is an ill mason that rejects any stone. Webster was once urged to speak on a subject of great importance, but refused, saying he was very busy and had no time to master the subject. "But," replied his friend, "a very few words from you would do much to awaken public attention to it." Webster replied, "If there be so much weight in my words, it is because I do not allow myself to speak on any subject until my mind is imbued with it." On one occasion Webster made a remarkable speech before the Phi Beta Kappa Society at Harvard, when a book was presented to him, but after he had gone, his impromptu speech, carefully written out, was found in the book which he had forgotten to take away. Demosthenes was once asked to speak on a great and sudden emergency, but replied, "I am not prepared." In fact, it was thought by many that Demosthenes did not possess any genius whatever, because he never allowed himself to speak on any subject without thorough preparation. In any meeting or assembly, when called upon, he would never rise, even to make remarks, it was said, without previously preparing himself. Alexander Hamilton said, "Men give me credit for genius. All the genius I have lies just in this: when I have a subject in hand, I study it profoundly. Day and night it is before me. I explore it in all its bearings. My mind becomes pervaded with it. Then the effort which I make the people are pleased to call the fruit of genius. It is the fruit of labor and thought. The law of labor is equally binding on genius and mediocrity." Nelaton, the great surgeon, said that if he had 4 minutes in which to perform an operation on which a life depended, he would take 1 minute to consider how best to do it. "Many men," says Longfellow, "do not allow their principles to take root, but pull them up every now and then, as children do flowers they have planted, to see if they are growing." We must not only work, but also wait. "The spruce young spark," says Sizer, "who thinks chiefly of his mustache and boots and shiny hat, of getting along nicely and easily during the day, and talking about the theater, the opera, or a fast horse, ridiculing the faithful young fellow who came to learn the business and make a man of himself because he will not join in wasting his time in dissipation, will see the day, if his useless life is not earlier blasted by vicious indulgences, when he will be glad to accept a situation from the fellow clerk whom he now ridicules and affects to despise, when the latter shall stand in the firm, dispensing benefits and acquiring fortune. I have been watching the careers of young men by the thousand in this busy city of New York for over 30 years, said Dr. Cuyler, and I find that the chief difference between the successful and the failures lies in the single element of staying power. Permanent success is oftener won by holding on than by sudden dash, however brilliant. The easily discouraged, who are pushed back by a straw, are all the time dropping to the rear, to perish or to be carried along on the stretcher of charity. They who understand and practice Abraham Lincoln's homely maxim of pegging away have achieved the solidest success. The Duke of Wellington became so discouraged because he did not advance in the army that he applied for a much inferior position in the Customs Department, but was refused. Napoleon had applied for every vacant position for 7 years before he was recognized, but meanwhile he studied with all his might, supplementing what was considered a thorough military education by researches and reflections which in later years enabled him easily to teach the art of war to veterans who had never dreamed of his novel combinations. Reserves which carry us through great emergencies are the result of long working and long waiting. Dr. Collier declares that reserves mean to a man also achievement, the power to do the grandest thing possible to your nature when you feel you must, or some precious thing will be lost, to do well always, but best in the crisis on which all things turn, to stand the strain of a long fight, and still find you have something left, and so to never know you are beaten, because you never are beaten. He only is independent in action who has been earnest and thorough in preparation and self-culture. Not for school, but for life, we learn, and our habits, of promptness, earnestness, and thoroughness, or of tardiness, fickleness, and superficiality, are the things acquired most readily and longest retained. To vary the language of another, the 3 great essentials to success in mental and physical labor are practice, patience, and perseverance, but the greatest of these is perseverance. Let us, then, be up and doing, with a heart for any fate, still achieving, still pursuing, learn to labor and to wait. Chapter 41. The might of little things. Think not a trifle, though it small appear. Small sands the mountain, moments make the year, and trifles, life. Young. It is but the littleness of man that sees no greatness in trifles. Wendell Phillips. He that despiseth small things shall fall by little and little. The creation of 1,000 forests is in one acorn. Emerson. Men are led by trifles. Napoleon. A pebble on the streamlet scant has turned the course of many a river. The bad thing about a little sin is that it won't stay little. Arletta's pretty feet, glistening in the brook, made her the mother of William the Conqueror, says Palgrave's History of Normandy and England. Had she not thus fascinated Duke Robert the Liberal of Normandy, Harold would not have fallen at Hastings, no Anglo-Norman dynasty could have arisen, no British Empire. We may tell which way the wind blew before the deluge by marking the ripple and cupping of the rain in the petrified sand now preserved forever. We tell the very path by which gigantic creatures, whom man never saw, walked to the river's edge to find their food. It was little Greece that rolled back the overflowing tide of Asiatic luxury and despotism, giving instead to Europe and America models of the highest political freedom yet attained, and germs of limitless mental growth. A different result at Plataea would have delayed the progress of the human race more than 10 centuries. Among the lofty Alps, it is said, the guides sometimes demand absolute silence, lest the vibration of the voice bring down an avalanche. The power of observation in the American Indian would put many an educated man to shame. Returning home, an Indian discovered that his venison, which had been hanging up to dry, had been stolen. After careful observation, he started to track the thief through the woods. Meeting a man on the route, he asked him if he had seen a little old white man with a short gun and with a small bobtailed dog. The man told him he had met such a man, but was surprised to find that the Indian had not even seen the one he described, and asked him how he could give such a minute description of the man he had never seen. "I knew the thief was a little man," said the Indian, "because he rolled up a stone to stand on in order to reach the venison. I knew he was an old man by his short steps. I knew he was a white man by his turning out his toes in walking, which an Indian never does. I knew he had a short gun by the mark it left on the tree where he had stood it up. I knew the dog was small by his tracks and short steps. and that he had a bobtail by the mark it left in the dust where he sat a day. 2 drops of rain, falling side by side, were separated a few inches by a gentle breeze. Striking on opposite sides of the roof of a courthouse in Wisconsin, one rolled southward through the Rock River and the Mississippi to the Gulf of Mexico, while the other entered successively the Fox River, Green Bay, Lake Michigan, the Straits of Mackinac, Lake Huron, St. Clair River, Lake St. Clair, Detroit River, Lake Erie, Niagara River, Lake Ontario, the St. Lawrence River, and finally reached the Gulf of St. Lawrence. How slight the influence of the breeze! Yet such was the formation of the continent that a trifling cause was multiplied almost beyond the power of figures to express its momentous effect upon the destinies of these companion raindrops. Who can calculate the future of the smallest trifle when a mud crack swells to an Amazon and the stealing of a penny may end on the scaffold? The act of a moment may cause a life's regret. A trigger may be pulled in an instant, but the soul returns never. A spark falling upon some combustibles led to the invention of gunpowder. A few bits of seaweed and driftwood, floating on the waves, enabled Columbus to stay a mutiny of his sailors which threatened to prevent the discovery of a new world. There are moments in history which balance years of ordinary life. Dana could interest a class for hours on a grain of sand, and from a single bone, such as no one had ever seen before, Agassiz could deduce the entire structure and habits of an animal which no man had ever seen so accurately that subsequent discoveries of complete skeletons have not changed one of his conclusions. A cricket once saved a military expedition from destruction. The commanding officer and hundreds of his men were going to South America on a great ship, and, through the carelessness of the watch, they would have been dashed upon a ledge of rock had it not been for a cricket which a soldier had brought on board. When the little insect scented the land, it broke its long silence by a shrill note, and thus warned them of their danger. By gnawing through a dike, even a rat may drown a nation. A little boy in Holland saw water trickling from a small hole near the bottom of a dike. He realized that the leak would rapidly become larger if the water were not checked, so he held his hand over the hole for hours on a dark and dismal night until he could attract the attention of passers-by. His name is still held in grateful remembrance in Holland. The beetling chalk cliffs of England were built by rhizopods, too small to be clearly seen without the aid of a magnifying glass. What was so unlikely as that throwing an empty wine flask in the fire should furnish the first notion of a locomotive, or that the sickness of an Italian chemist's wife and her absurd craving for reptiles for food should begin the electric telegraph? Madame Galvani noticed the contraction of the muscles of a skinned frog which was accidentally touched at the moment her husband took a spark from an electrical machine. She gave the hint which led to the discovery of galvanic electricity, now so useful in the arts and in transmitting vocal or written language. The fate of a nation, says Gladstone, has often depended upon the good or bad digestion of a fine dinner. A Stamp Act to raise £60,000 produced the American Revolution, a war that cost England £100 million. A war between France and England, costing more than 100,000 lives, grew out of a quarrel as to which of 2 vessels should first be served with water. The quarrel of 2 Indian boys over a grasshopper led to the Grasshopper War. What mighty contests rise from trivial things! A young man once went to India to seek his fortune, but, finding no opening, he went to his room, loaded his pistol, put the muzzle to his head, and pulled the trigger. But it did not go off. He went to the window to point it in another direction and try it again, resolved that if the weapon went off, he would regard it as a providence that he was spared. He pulled the trigger and it went off the first time. Trembling with excitement, he resolved to hold his life sacred, to make the most of it, and never again to cheapen it. This young man became General Robert Clive, who, with but a handful of European soldiers, secured to the East India Company and afterwards to Great Britain a great and rich country with 200 millions of people. The cackling of a goose aroused the sentinels and saved Rome from the Gauls, and the pain from a thistle warned a Scottish army of the approach of the Danes. Henry Ward Beecher came within 1 vote of being elected superintendent of a railway. If he had had that vote, America would probably have lost its greatest preacher. What a little thing fixes destiny! Trifles light as air often suggest to the thinking mind ideas which have revolutionized the world. A famous ruby was offered to the English government. The report of the crown jeweler was that it was the finest he had ever seen or heard of, but that one of the facets was slightly fractured. That invisible fracture reduced the value of the ruby thousands of dollars, and it was rejected from the regalia of England. It was a little thing for the janitor to leave a lamp swinging in the cathedral at Pisa, but in that steady swaying motion the boy Galileo saw the pendulum, and conceived the idea of thus measuring time. "I was singing to the mouthpiece of a telephone," said Edison, "when the vibrations of my voice caused a fine steel point to pierce one of my fingers held just behind it. That set me to thinking. If I could record the motions of the point and send it over the same surface afterward, I saw no reason why the thing would not talk. I determined to make a machine that would work accurately, and gave my assistants the necessary instructions, telling them what I had discovered. That's the whole story. The phonograph is the result of the pricking of a finger. It was a little thing for a cow to kick over a lantern left in a shanty, but it laid Chicago in ashes, and rendered homeless 100,000 people. Some little weakness, some self-indulgence, a quick temper, want of decision, are little things, you say, when placed beside great abilities, but they have wrecked many a career. The Parliament of Great Britain, the Congress of the United States, and representative governments all over the world have come from King John signing the Magna Carta. Bentham says, "The turn of a sentence has decided many a friendship, and, for aught we know, the fate of many a kingdom." Perhaps you turned a cold shoulder but once, and made but one stinging remark, yet it may have cost you a friend forever. The sight of a stranded cuttlefish led Cuvier to an investigation which made him one of the greatest natural historians in the world. The web of a spider suggested to Captain Brown the idea of a suspension bridge. A missing marriage certificate kept the hod carrier of Hugh Miller from establishing his claim to the earldom of Crawford. The masons would call out, "John, Yearl of Crawford, bring us on either hod o' lime." The absence of a comma in a bill which passed through Congress years ago cost our government $1 million. A single misspelled word prevented a deserving young man from obtaining a situation as instructor in a New England college. "I cannot see that you have made any progress since my last visit," said a gentleman to Michelangelo. "But," said the sculptor, "I have retouched this part, polished that, softened that feature, brought out that muscle, given some expression to this lip, more energy to that limb, etc." "But they are trifles," exclaimed the visitor. "It may be so," replied the great artist, "but trifles make perfection, and perfection is no trifle." That infinite patience which made Michelangelo spend a week in bringing out a muscle in a statue, with more vital fidelity to truth, or Gerhard Dow a day in giving the right effect to a dewdrop on a cabbage leaf, makes all the difference between success and failure. The cry of the infant Moses attracted the attention of Pharaoh's daughter, and gave the Jews a lawgiver. A bird alighting on the bough of a tree at the mouth of the cave where Mahomet lay hid turned aside his pursuers, and gave a prophet to many nations. A flight of birds probably prevented Columbus from discovering this continent. When he was growing anxious, Martin Alonso Pinzon persuaded him to follow a flight of parrots toward the southwest, for to the Spanish seamen of that day it was good luck to follow in the wake of a flock of birds when on a voyage of discovery. But for his change of course Columbus would have reached the coast of Florida. "Never," wrote Humboldt, "had the flight of birds more important consequences." The children of a spectacle maker placed 2 or more pairs of the spectacles before each other in play, and told their father that distant objects looked larger. From this hint came the telescope. Every day is a little life, and our whole life but a day repeated. Those that dare lose a day are dangerously prodigal, those that dare misspend it, desperate. What is the happiness of your life made up of? Little courtesies, little kindnesses, pleasant words, genial smiles, a friendly letter, good wishes, and good deeds. 1 in a million, once in a lifetime, may do a heroic action. Napoleon was a master of trifles. To details which his inferior officers thought too microscopic for their notice, he gave the most exhaustive consideration. Nothing was too small for his attention. He must know all about the provisions, the horse fodder, the biscuits, the camp kettles, the shoes. When the bugle sounded for the march to battle, every officer had his orders as to the exact route which he should follow, the exact day he was to arrive at a certain station, and the exact hour he was to leave, and they were all to reach the point of destination at a precise moment. It is said that nothing could be more perfectly planned than his memorable march which led to the victory of Austerlitz, and which sealed the fate of Europe for many years. He would often charge his absent officers to send him perfectly accurate returns, even to the smallest detail. When they are sent to me, I give up every occupation in order to read them in detail, and to observe the difference between one monthly return and another. No young girl enjoys her novel as much as I do these returns. Napoleon left nothing to chance, nothing to contingency, so far as he could possibly avoid it. Everything was planned to a nicety before he attempted to execute it. Wellington, too, was great in little things. He knew no such things as trifles. While other generals trusted to subordinates, he gave his personal attention to the minutest detail. The history of many a failure could be written in 3 words: lack of detail. How many a lawyer has failed from the lack of details in deeds and important papers, the lack of little words which seemed like surplusage, and which involved his clients in litigation, and often great losses. How many wills are contested from the carelessness of lawyers in the omission or shading of words, or ambiguous use of language. Not even Helen of Troy, it is said, was beautiful enough to spare the tip of her nose, and if Cleopatra's had been an inch shorter, Mark Antony might never have become infatuated with her wonderful charms, and the blemish would have changed the history of the world. And Bullen's fascinating smile split the great Church of Rome in twain, and gave a nation an altered destiny. Napoleon, who feared not to attack the proudest monarchs in their capitals, shrank from the political influence of one independent woman in private life, Madame de Staël. Cromwell was about to sail for America when a law was passed prohibiting emigration. At that time he was a profligate, having squandered all his property. But when he found that he could not leave England, he reformed his life. Had he not been detained, who can tell what the history of Great Britain would have been? From the careful and persistent accumulation of innumerable facts, each trivial in itself, but in the aggregate forming a mass of evidence, a Darwin extracts his law of evolution, and a Linnaeus constructs the science of botany. A pan of water and 2 thermometers were the tools by which Dr. Black discovered latent heat, and a prism, a lens, and a sheet of pasteboard enabled Newton to unfold the composition of light and the origin of colors. An eminent foreign savant called on Dr. Wollaston, and asked to be shown over those laboratories of his in which science had been enriched by so many great discoveries, when the doctor took him into a little study, and, pointing to an old tea tray on the table, on which stood a few watch-glasses, test papers, a small balance, and a blowpipe, said, "There is my laboratory." A burnt stick and a barn door served Wilkie in lieu of pencil and paper. A single potato, carried to England by Sir Walter Raleigh in the 16th century, has multiplied into food for millions, driving famine from Ireland again and again. It seemed a small thing to drive William Brewster, John Robinson, and the poor people of Austerfield and Scrooby into perpetual exile, but as pilgrims they became the founders of a mighty people. A few immortal sentences from Garrison and Phillips, a few poems from Lowell and Whittier, and the leaven is at work which will not cease its action until the whipping post and bodily servitude are abolished forever. For want of a nail the shoe was lost. For want of a shoe the horse was lost. For want of a horse the rider was lost. And all, says Poor Richard, for want of a horseshoe nail. A single remark dropped by an unknown person in the street led to the successful story of the breadwinners. A hymn chanted by the barefooted friars in the Temple of Jupiter at Rome led to the famous Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire. Words are things, says Byron, and a small drop of ink, falling like dew upon a thought, produces that which makes thousands, perhaps millions, think. I give these books for the founding of a college in this colony. Such were the words of 10 ministers who in the year 1700 assembled at the village of Brantford, a few miles east of New Haven. Each of the worthy fathers deposited a few books upon the table around which they were sitting. Such was the founding of Yale College. Great men are noted for their attention to trifles. Goethe once asked a monarch to excuse him, during an interview, while he went to an adjoining room to jot down a stray thought. Hogarth would make sketches of rare faces and characteristics upon his fingernails upon the streets. Indeed, to a truly great mind there are no little things. Trifles light as air suggest to the keen observer the solution of mighty problems. Bits of glass arranged to amuse children led to the discovery of the kaleidoscope. Goodyear discovered how to vulcanize rubber by forgetting, until it became red-hot, a skillet containing a compound which he had before considered worthless. A shipworm boring a piece of wood suggested to Sir Isambard Brunel the idea of a tunnel under the Thames at London. Tracks of extinct animals in the old red sandstone led Hugh Miller on and on until he became the greatest geologist of his time. Sir Walter Scott once saw a shepherd boy plodding sturdily along, and asked him to ride. This boy was George Kemp, who became so enthusiastic in his study of sculpture that he walked 50 miles and back to see a beautiful statue. He did not forget the kindness of Sir Walter, and, when the latter died, threw his soul into the design of the magnificent monument erected in Edinburgh to the memory of the author of Waverley. A poor boy applied for a situation at a bank in Paris, but was refused. As he left the door, he picked up a pin. The bank president saw this, called the boy back, and gave him a situation from which he rose until he became the greatest banker of Paris, Lafitte. A Massachusetts soldier in the Civil War observed a bird hulling rice, and shot it. Taking its bill for a model, he invented a hulling machine which has revolutionized the rice business. The eye is a perpetual camera imprinting upon the sensitive mental plates and packing away in the brain for future use every face, every tree, every plant, flower, hill, stream, mountain, every scene upon the street, in fact, everything which comes within its range. There is a phonograph in our natures which catches, however thoughtless and transient, every syllable we utter, and registers forever the slightest enunciation, and renders it immortal. These notes may appear 1,000 years hence, reproduced in our descendants, in all their beautiful or terrible detail. Least of all seeds, greatest of all harvests, seems to be one of the great laws of nature. All life comes from microscopic beginnings. In nature there is nothing small. The microscope reveals as great a world below as the telescope above. All of nature's laws govern the smallest atoms, and a single drop of water is a miniature ocean. The strength of a chain lies in its weakest link, however large and strong all the others may be. We are all inclined to be proud of our strong points, while we are sensitive and neglectful of our weaknesses. Yet it is our greatest weakness which measures our real strength. A soldier who escapes the bullets of 1,000 battles may die from the scratch of a pin, and many a ship has survived the shocks of icebergs and the storms of ocean only to founder in a smooth sea from holes made by tiny insects. Small things become great when a great soul sees them. A single noble or heroic act of one man has sometimes elevated a nation. Many an honorable career has resulted from a kind word spoken in season or the warm grasp of a friendly hand. It is the little rift within the lute that by and by will make the music mute, and, ever widening, slowly silence all. Tennyson. It was only a glad good morning, as she passed along the way, but it spread the morning's glory over the livelong day. Only a thought in passing, a smile, or encouraging word, has lifted many a burden no other gift could have stirred. Chapter 42. The salary you do not find in your pay envelope. The quality which you put into your work will determine the quality of your life. The habit of insisting upon the best of which you are capable, of always demanding of yourself the highest, never accepting the lowest or second best, no matter how small your remuneration, will make all the difference to you between failure and success. If the laborer gets no more than the wages his employer offers him, he is cheated, he cheats himself. A boy or a man who works simply for his salary, and is actuated by no higher motive, is dishonest, and the one whom he most defrauds is himself. He is cheating himself, in the quality of his daily work, of that which all the after years, try as he may, can never give him back. If I were allowed but one utterance on the subject, so vital to every young man starting on the journey of life, I would say, don't think too much of the amount of salary your employer gives you at the start. Think, rather, of the possible salary you can give yourself, in increasing your skill, in expanding your experience, in enlarging and ennobling yourself. A man's or a boy's work is material with which to build character and manhood. It is life school for practical training of the faculties, stretching the mind, and strengthening and developing the intellect, not a mere mill for grinding out a salary of dollars and cents. Bismarck was said to have really founded the German Empire when working for a small salary as secretary to the German legation in Russia, for in that position he absorbed the secrets of strategy and diplomacy which later were used so effectively for his country. He worked so assiduously, so efficiently, that Germany prized his services more than those of the ambassador himself. If Bismarck had earned only his salary, he might have remained a perpetual clerk, and Germany a tangle of petty states. I have never known an employee to rise rapidly, or even to get beyond mediocrity, whose pay envelope was his goal, who could not see infinitely more in his work than what he found in the envelope on Saturday night. That is necessity, but the larger part of the real pay of a real man's work is outside of the pay envelope. One part of this outside salary is the opportunity of the employee to absorb the secrets of his employer's success, and to learn from his mistakes, while he is being paid for learning his trade or profession. The other part, and the best of all, is the opportunity for growth, for development, for mental expansion, the opportunity to become a larger, broader, more efficient man. The opportunity for growth in a disciplinary institution, where the practical faculties, the executive faculties, are brought into systematic, vigorous exercise at a definite time and for a definite number of hours, is an advantage beyond computation. There is no estimating the value of such training. It is the opportunity, my employee friend, that will help you to make a large man of yourself, which, Perhaps you could not possibly do without being employed in some kind of an institution which has the motive, the machinery, the patronage to give you the disciplining and training you need to bring out your strongest qualities. And instead of paying for the opportunity of unfolding and developing from a green, ignorant boy into a strong, level-headed, efficient man, you are paid. The youth who is always haggling over the question of how many dollars and cents he will sell his services for, little realizes how he is cheating himself by not looking at the larger salary he can pay himself in increasing his skill, in expanding his experience, and in making himself a better, stronger, more useful man. The few dollars he finds in his pay envelope are to this larger salary as the chips which fly from the sculptor's chisel are to the angel which he is trying to call out of the marble. You can draw from the faithfulness of your work, from the grand spirit which you bring to it, the high purpose which emanates from you in its performance, a recompense so munificent that what your employer pays you will seem insignificant beside it. He pays you in dollars. You pay yourself in valuable experience, in fine training, in increased efficiency, in splendid discipline, in self-expression, in character building. Then, too, the ideal employer gives those who work for him a great deal that is not found in the pay envelope. He gives them encouragement, sympathy. He inspires them with the possibility of doing something higher, better. How small and narrow and really blind to his own interests must be the youth who can weigh a question of salary against all those privileges he receives in exchange for the meager services he is able to render his employer. Do not fear that your employer will not recognize your merit and advance you as rapidly as you deserve. He is looking for efficient employees, and what employer is not? It will be to his own interest to do so, just as soon as it is profitable. W. Burke Cochran, himself a remarkable example of success, says, "The man who brings to his occupation a loyal desire to do his best is certain to succeed. By doing the thing at hand surpassingly well, he shows that it would be profitable to employ him in some higher form of occupation, and, when there is profit in his promotion, he is pretty sure to secure it. Do you think that kings of business like Andrew Carnegie, John Wanamaker, Robert C. Ogden, and other lesser powers in the commercial world would have attained their present commanding success had they hesitated and haggled about $1 or $2 of salary when they began their life work? If they had, they would now probably be working on comparatively small salaries for other people. It was not salary, but opportunity that each wanted, a chance to show what was in him, to absorb the secrets of the business. They were satisfied with $1 or $2 apiece a week, hardly enough to live on, while they were learning the lessons that made them what they are today. No, the boys who rise in the world are not those who, at the start, split hairs about salaries. Often we see bright boys who have worked, perhaps for years, on small salaries, suddenly jumping, as if by magic, into high and responsible positions. Why? Simply because, while their employers were paying them but a few dollars a week, they were paying themselves vastly more in the fine quality of their work, in enthusiasm, determination, and high purpose they brought to their tasks, and in increased insight into business methods. Colonel Robert C. Clowry, president of the Western Union Telegraph Company, worked without pay as a messenger boy for months for experience, which he regarded as worth infinitely more than salary, and scores of our most successful men have cheerfully done the same thing. A millionaire merchant of New York told me the story of his rise. "I walked from my home in New England to New York," he said, "where I secured a place to sweep out a store for $3.50 a week. At the end of a year, I accepted an offer from the firm to remain for 5 years at a salary of $7.50 a week. Long before this time had expired, however, I had a proposition from another large concern in New York to act as its foreign representative at a salary of $3,000 a year. I told the manager that I was then under contract, but that, when my time should be completed, I should be glad to talk with him in regard to his proposition. When his contract was nearly up, he was called into the office of the head of the house, and a new contract with him for a term of years at $3,000 a year was proposed. The young man told his employers that the manager of another house had offered him that amount a year or more before, but that he did not accept it because he wouldn't break his contract. They told him they would think the matter over and see what they could do for him. Incredible as it may seem, they notified him, a little later, that they were prepared to enter into a 10-year contract with him at $10,000 a year, and the contract was closed. He told me that he and his wife lived on $8 a week in New York during a large part of this time, and that, by saving and investments, they laid up $117,000. At the end of his contract, he was taken into the firm as a partner and became a millionaire. Suppose that this boy had listened to his associates, who probably said to him, many times, "What a fool you are, George, to to work here overtime to do the things which others neglect? Why should you stay here nights and help pack goods, and all that sort of thing, when it is not expected of you? Would he then have risen above them, leaving them in the ranks of perpetual employees? No, but the boy who walked 100 miles to New York to get a job saw in every opportunity a great occasion, for he could not tell when fate might be taking his measure for a larger place. The very first time he swept out the store, he felt within him the ability to become a great merchant, and he determined that he would be. He felt that the opportunity was the salary. The chance actually to do with his own hands the thing which he wanted to learn, to see the way in which princely merchants do business, to watch their methods, to absorb their processes, to make their secrets his own. This was his salary, compared with which the $3.50 looked contemptible. He put himself into training, always looking out for the main chance. He never allowed anything of importance to escape his attention. When he was not working, he was watching others, studying methods, and asking questions of everybody he came in contact with in the store, so eager was he to learn how everything was done. He told me that he did not go out of New York City for 12 years, that he preferred to study the store, and to absorb every bit of knowledge that he could, for he was bound some day to be a partner or to have a store of his own. It is not difficult to see a proprietor in the boy who sweeps the store or waits on customers, if the qualities that make a proprietor are in him, by watching him work for a single day. You can tell by the spirit which he brings to his task whether there is in him the capacity for growth, expansion, enlargement, an ambition to rise, to be somebody, or an inclination to shirk, to do as little as possible for the largest amount of salary. When you get a job, just think of yourself as actually starting out in business for yourself, as really working for yourself. Get as much salary as you can, but remember that that is a very small part of the consideration. You have actually gotten an opportunity to get right into the very heart of the great activities of a large concern, to get close to men who do things, an opportunity to absorb knowledge and valuable secrets on every hand, an opportunity to drink in, through your eyes and your ears, knowledge wherever you go in the establishment, knowledge that will be invaluable to you in the future. Every hint and every suggestion which you can pick up, every bit of knowledge you can absorb, you should regard as a part of your future capital which will be worth more than money capital when you start out for yourself. Just make up your mind that you are going to be a sponge in that institution and absorb every particle of information and knowledge possible. Resolve that you will call upon all of your resourcefulness, your inventiveness, your ingenuity, to devise new and better ways of doing things, that you will be progressive, up-to-date, that you will enter into your work with a spirit of enthusiasm and a zest which know no bounds, and you will be surprised to see how quickly you will attract the attention of those above you. This striving for excellence will make you grow. It will call out your resources, call out the best thing in you. The constant stretching of the mind over problems which interest you, which are to mean everything to you in the future, will help you expand into a broader, larger, more effective man. If you work with this spirit, you will form a like habit of accuracy, of close observation, a habit of reading human nature, a habit of adjusting means to ends, a habit of thoroughness, of system, a habit of putting your best into everything you do, which means the ultimate attainment of your maximum efficiency. In other words, if you give your best to your employer, the best possible comes back to you in skill, training, shrewdness, acumen, and power. Your employer may pinch you on salary, but he cannot close your eyes and ears. He cannot shut off your perceptive faculties. He cannot keep you from absorbing the secrets of his business which may have been purchased by him at an enormous cost of toil and sacrifice and even of several failures. On the other hand, it is impossible for you to rob your employer by clipping your hours, shirking your work, by carelessness or indifference, without robbing yourself of infinitely more, of capital which is worth vastly more than money capital, the chance to make a man of yourself, the chance to have a clean record behind you instead of a smirched one. If you think you are being kept back, if you are working for too small a salary, if favoritism puts someone into a position above you which you have justly earned, never mind, no one can rob you of your greatest reward, the skill, the efficiency, the power you have gained, the consciousness of doing your level best, of giving the best thing in you to your employer, all of which advantages you will carry with you to your next position, whatever it may be. Don't say to yourself, I am not paid for doing this extra work, I do not get enough salary anyway, and it is perfectly right for me to shirk when my employer is not in sight or to clip my hours when I can, for this means a loss of self-respect. You will never again have the same confidence in your ability to succeed. You will always be conscious that you have done a little mean thing, and no amount of juggling with yourself can induce that inward monitor which says right to the well-done thing and wrong to the botched work, to alter its verdict in your favor. There is something within you that you cannot bribe, a divine sense of justice and right that cannot be blindfolded. Nothing will ever compensate you for the loss of faith in yourself. You may still succeed when others have lost confidence in you, but never when you have lost confidence in yourself. If you do not respect yourself, if you do not believe in yourself, your career is at an end so far as its upward tendency is concerned. Then again, an employee's reputation is his capital. In the absence of money capital, his reputation means everything. It not only follows him around from one employer to another, but it also follows him when he goes into business for himself, and is always either helping or hindering him, according to its nature. Contrast the condition of a young man starting out for himself who has looked upon his position as a sacred trust, a great opportunity, backed, buttressed, and supported by a splendid past, an untarnished reputation, a reputation for being a dead-in-earnest hard worker, square, loyal, and true to his employer's interests, with that of another young man of equal ability starting out for himself, who has done just as little work for his salary as possible, and who has gone on the principle that the more he could get out of an employer, the more salary he could get with less effort, the shrewder, smarter man he was. The very reputation of the first young man is splendid credit. He is backed up by the good opinion of everybody that knows him. People are afraid of the other. They cannot trust him. He beat his employer, why should not he beat others? Everybody knows that he has not been honest at heart with his employer, not loyal or true. He must work all the harder to overcome the handicap of a bad reputation, a smirched record. In other words, he is starting out in life with a heavy handicap, which, if it does not drag him down to failure, will make his burden infinitely greater, and success, even a purely commercial success, so much the harder to attain. There is nothing like a good, solid, substantial reputation, a clean record, an untarnished past. It sticks to us through life, and is always helping us. We find it waiting at the bank when we try to borrow money, or at the jobbers when we ask for credit. It is always backing us up and helping us in all sorts of ways. Young men are sometimes surprised at their rapid advancement. They cannot understand it, because they do not realize the tremendous power of a clean name, of a good reputation which is backing them. I know a young man who came to New York, got a position in a publishing house at $15 a week, and worked 5 years before he received $35 a week. The other employees and his friends called him a fool for staying at the office after hours and taking work home nights and holidays, for such a small salary, but he told them that the opportunity was what he was after, not the salary. His work attracted the attention of a publisher who offered him $60 a week, and very soon advanced him to $75, but he carried with him to the new position the same habits of painstaking, hard work, never thinking of the salary, but regarding the opportunity as everything. Employees sometimes think that they get no credit for trying to do more than they are paid for, but here is an instance of a young man who attracted the attention of others even outside of the firm he worked for, just because he was trying to earn a great deal more than he was paid for doing. The result was that in less than 2 years from the time he was receiving $60 a week, he went to a third large publishing house at $10,000 a year, and also with an interest in the business. The salary is of very little importance to you in comparison with the reputation for integrity and efficiency you have left behind you and the experience you have gained while earning the salary. These are the great things. In olden times, boys had to give years of their time in order to learn a trade, and often would pay their employer for the opportunity. English boys used to think it was a great opportunity to be able to get into a good concern, with a chance to work without salary for years in order to learn their business or trade. Now the boy is paid for learning his trade. Many employees may not think it is so very bad to clip their hours, to shirk at every opportunity, to sneak away and hide during business hours, to loiter when out on business for their employer, to go to their work in the morning all used up from dissipation, but often when they try to get another place their reputation has gone before them, and they are not wanted. Others excuse themselves for poor work on the ground that their employer does not appreciate their services and is mean to them. A youth might just as well excuse himself for his boorish manners and ungentlemanly conduct on the ground that other people were mean and ungentlemanly to him. My young friends, you have nothing to do with your employer's character or his method of doing things. You may not be able to make him do what is right, but you can do right yourself. You may not be able to make him a gentleman, but you can be one yourself, and you cannot afford to ruin yourself and your whole future just because your employer is not what he ought to be. No matter how mean and stingy he may be, your opportunity for the time is with him, and it rests with you whether you will use it or abuse it, whether you will make of it a stepping stone or a stumbling block. The fact is that your present position, your way of doing your work, is the key that will unlock the door above you. Slighted work, botched work, will never make a key to unlock the door to anything but failure and disgrace. There is nothing else so valuable to you as an opportunity to build a name for yourself. Your reputation is the foundation for your future success, and if you slip rotten hours and slighted, botched work into the foundation, your superstructure will topple. The foundation must be clean, solid, and firm. The quality which you put into your work will determine the quality of your life. The habit of insisting upon the best of which you are capable, of always demanding of yourself the highest, never accepting the lowest or second best, no matter how small your remuneration, will make all the difference to you between mediocrity or failure and success. If you bring to your work the spirit of an artist instead of an artisan, a burning zeal, an absorbing enthusiasm, these will take the drudgery out of it and make it a delight. Take no chances of marring your reputation by the picayune and unworthy endeavor to get square with a stingy or mean employer. Never mind what kind of a man he is, resolve that you will approach your task in the spirit of a master, that whether he is a man of high ideals or not, you will be one. Remember that you are a sculptor and that every act is a chisel blow upon life's marble block. You cannot afford to strike false blows which may mar the angel that sleeps in the stone. Whether it is beautiful or hideous, divine or brutal, the image you evolve from the block must stand as an expression of yourself, of your ideals. Those who do not care how they do their work, if they can only get through with it and get their salary for it, pay very dearly for their trifling. They cut very sorry figures in life. Regard your work as a great life school for the broadening, deepening, rounding into symmetry, harmony, beauty, of your God-given faculties, which are uncut diamonds sacredly entrusted to you for the polishing and bringing out of their hidden wealth and beauty. Look upon it as a man-builder, a character-builder, and not as a mere living-getter. Regard the living-getting, money-making part of your career as a mere incidental as compared with the man-making part of it. The smallest people in the world are those who work for salary alone. The little money you get in your pay envelope is a pretty small, low motive for which to work. It may be necessary to secure your bread and butter, but you have something infinitely higher to satisfy than that. That is, your sense of the right, the demand in you to do your level best, to be a man, to do the square thing, the fair thing. These should speak so loud in you that the mere bread and butter question will be insignificant in comparison. Many young employees, just because they do not get quite as much salary as they think they should, deliberately throw away all of the other larger, grander remuneration possible for them outside of their pay envelope, for the sake of getting square with their employer. They deliberately adopt a shirking, do-as-little-as-possible policy, and instead of getting this larger, more important salary, which they can pay themselves, they prefer the consequent arrested development, and become small, narrow, inefficient, rutty men and women, with nothing large or magnanimous, nothing broad, noble, progressive in their nature. Their leadership faculties, their initiative, their planning ability, their ingenuity and resourcefulness, inventiveness, and all the qualities which make the leader, the large, full, complete man, remain undeveloped. While trying to get square with their employer, by giving him pinched service, they blight their own growth, strangle their own prospects, and go through life half men instead of full men, small, narrow, weak men, instead of the strong, grand, complete men they might be. I have known employees actually to work harder in scheming, shirking, trying to keep from working hard in the performance of their duties, than they would have worked if they had tried to do their best, and had given the largest, the most liberal service possible to their employers. The hardest work in the world is that which is grudgingly done. Start out with a tacit understanding with yourself that you will be a man, that you will express in your work the highest thing in you, the best thing in you. You cannot afford to debase or demoralize yourself by bringing out your mean side, the lowest and most despicable thing in you. Never mind whether your employer appreciates the high quality of your work or not, or thinks more of you for your conscientiousness. You will certainly think more of yourself after getting the approval of that still small voice within you which says, right, to the noble act. The effort always to do your best will enlarge your capacity for doing things, and will encourage you to push ahead toward larger triumphs. Everywhere we see people who are haunted by the ghosts of half-finished jobs, the dishonest work done away back in their youth. These covered-up defects are always coming back to humiliate them later, to trip them up, and to bar their progress. The great failure army is full of people who have tried to get square with their employers for the small salary and lack of appreciation. No one can respect himself or have that sublime faith in himself which makes for high achievement while he puts half-hearted, mean service into his work. The man who has not learned to fling his whole soul into his task, who has not learned the secret of taking the drudgery out of his work by putting the best of himself into it, has not learned the first principles of success or happiness. Let other people do the poor jobs, the botched work, if they will. Keep your standard up. It is a lofty ideal that redeems the life from the curse of commonness and imparts a touch of nobility to the personality. No matter how small your salary or how unappreciative your employer, bring the entire man to your task. Be all there. Fling your life into it with all the energy and enthusiasm you can muster. Poor work injures your employer a little, but it may ruin you. Be proud of your work and go to it every morning superbly equipped. Go to it in the spirit of a master, of a conqueror. Determined to do your level best and never to demoralize yourself by doing your second best. Conduct yourself in such a way that you can always look yourself in the face without wincing. Then you will have a courage born of conviction, of personal nobility and integrity which have never been tarnished. What your employer thinks of you, what the world thinks of you, is not half as important as what you think of yourself. Others are with you comparatively little through life. You have to live with yourself day and night through your whole existence, and you cannot afford to tie that divine thing in you to a scoundrel. Chapter 43. Expect great things of yourself. Why, asked Mirabeau, should we call ourselves men, unless it be to succeed in everything everywhere? Nothing else will so nerve you to accomplish great things as to believe in your own greatness, in your own marvelous possibilities. Count that man an enemy who shakes your faith in yourself, in your ability to do the thing you have set your heart upon doing, for when your confidence is gone, your power is gone. Your achievement will never rise higher than your self-faith. It would be as reasonable for Napoleon to have expected to get his army over the Alps by sitting down and declaring that the undertaking was too great for him, as for you to hope to achieve anything significant in life while harboring grave doubts and fears as to your ability. The miracles of civilization have been performed by men and women of great self-confidence, who had unwavering faith in their power to accomplish the tasks they undertook. The race would have been centuries behind what it is today had it not been for their grit, their determination, their persistence in finding and making real the thing they believed in and which the world often denounced as chimerical or impossible. There is no law by which you can achieve success in anything without expecting it, demanding it, assuming it. There must be a strong, firm self-faith first, or the thing will never come. There is no room for chance in God's world of system and supreme order. Everything must have not only a cause, but a sufficient cause, a cause as large as the result. A stream cannot rise higher than its source. A great success must have a great source in expectation, in self-confidence, and in persistent endeavor to attain it. No matter how great the ability, how large the genius, or how splendid the education, the achievement will never rise higher than the confidence. He can who thinks he can, and he can't who thinks he can't. This is an inexorable, indisputable law. It does not matter what other people think of you, of your plans, or of your aims. No matter if they call you a visionary, a crank, or a dreamer, you must believe in yourself. You forsake yourself when you lose your confidence. Never allow anybody or any misfortune to shake your belief in yourself. You may lose your property, your health, your reputation, other people's confidence, even, but there is always hope for you so long as you keep a firm faith in yourself. If you never lose that, but keep pushing on, the world will, sooner or later, make way for you. A soldier once took a message to Napoleon in such great haste that the horse he rode dropped dead before he delivered the paper. Napoleon dictated his answer and, handing it to the messenger, ordered him to mount his own horse and deliver it with all possible speed. The messenger looked at the magnificent animal with its superb trappings and said, "Nay, General, but this is too gorgeous, too magnificent for a common soldier." Napoleon said, "Nothing is too good or too magnificent for a French soldier. The world is full of people like this poor French soldier, who think that what others have is too good for them, that it does not fit their humble condition, that they are not expected to have as good things as those who are more favored. They do not realize how they weaken themselves by this mental attitude of self-depreciation or self-effacement. They do not claim enough, expect enough, or demand enough of or for themselves. You will never become a giant if you only make a pygmy's claim for yourself, if you only expect small things of yourself. There is no law which can cause a pygmy's thinking to produce a giant. The statue follows the model. The model is the inward vision. Most people have been educated to think that it was not intended they should have the best there is in the world, that the good and the beautiful things of life were not designed for them, but were reserved for those especially favored by fortune. They have grown up under this conviction of their inferiority, and of course they will be inferior until they claim superiority as their birthright. A vast number of men and women who are really capable of doing great things, do small things, live mediocre lives, because they do not expect or demand enough of themselves. They do not know how to call out their best. One reason why the human race as a whole has not measured up to its possibilities, to its promise, one reason why we see everywhere splendid ability doing the work of mediocrity, is because people do not think half enough of themselves. We do not realize our divinity, that we are a part of the great causation principle of the universe. We do not think highly enough of our superb birthright, nor comprehend to what heights of sublimity we were intended and expected to rise, nor to what extent we can really be masters of ourselves. We fail to see that we can control our own destiny, make ourselves do whatever is possible, make ourselves become whatever we long to be. If we choose to be no more than clods of clay, says Marie Corelli, then we shall be used as clods of clay for braver feet to tread on. The persistent thought that you are not as good as others, that you are a weak, ineffective being, will lower your whole standard of life and paralyze your ability. A man who is self-reliant, positive, optimistic, and undertakes his work with the assurance of success, magnetizes conditions. He draws to himself the literal fulfillment of the promise, "For unto every one that hath shall be given, and he shall have abundance." There is everything in assuming the part we wish to play, and playing it royally. If you are ambitious to do big things, you must make a large program for yourself, and assume the part it demands. There is something in the atmosphere of the man who has a large and true estimate of himself, who believes that he is going to win out, something in his very appearance that wins half the battle before a blow is struck. Things get out of the way of the vigorous, affirmative man, which are always tripping the self-depreciating, negative man. We often hear it said of a man, everything he undertakes succeeds, or everything he touches turns to gold. By the force of his character and the creative power of his thought, such a man wrings success from the most adverse circumstances. Confidence begets confidence. A man who carries in his very presence an air of victory, radiates assurance, and imparts to others confidence that he can do the thing he attempts. As time goes on, he is reinforced not only by the power of his own thought, but also by that of all who know him. His friends and acquaintances affirm and reaffirm his ability to succeed, and make each successive triumph easier of achievement than its predecessor. His self-poise, assurance, confidence, and ability increase in a direct ratio to the number of his achievements. As the savage Indian thought that the power of every enemy he conquered entered into himself, so in reality does every conquest in war, in peaceful industry, in commerce, in invention, in science, or in art add to the conqueror's power to do the next thing. Set the mind toward the thing you would accomplish so resolutely, so definitely, and with such vigorous determination, and put so much grit into your resolution, that nothing on earth can turn you from your purpose until you attain it. This very assertion of superiority, the assumption of power, the affirmation of belief in yourself, the mental attitude that claims success as an inalienable birthright, will strengthen the whole man and give power to a combination of faculties which doubt, fear, and a lack of confidence undermine. Confidence is the Napoleon of the mental army. It doubles and trebles the power of all the other faculties. The whole mental army waits until confidence leads the way. Even a racehorse cannot win the prize after it has once lost confidence in itself. Courage, born of self-confidence, is the prod which brings out the last ounce of reserve force. The reason why so many men fail is because they do not commit themselves with a determination to win at any cost. They do not have that superb confidence in themselves which never looks back, which burns all bridges behind it. There is just uncertainty enough as to whether they will succeed to take the edge off their effort, and it is just this little difference between doing pretty well and flinging all oneself, all his power, into his career, that makes the difference between mediocrity and a grand achievement. If you doubt your ability to do what you set out to do, if you think that others are better fitted to do it than you, if you fear to let yourself out and take chances, if you lack boldness, if you have a timid, shrinking nature, if the negatives preponderate in your vocabulary, if you think that you lack positiveness, initiative, aggressiveness, ability, you can never win anything very great until you change your whole mental attitude and learn to have great faith in yourself. Fear, doubt, and timidity must be turned out of your mind. Your own mental picture of yourself is a good measure of yourself and your possibilities. If there is no outreach to your mind, no spirit of daring, no firm self-faith, you will never accomplish much. A man's confidence measures the height of his possibilities. A stream cannot rise higher than its fountainhead. Power is largely a question of strong, vigorous, perpetual thinking along the line of the ambition, parallel with the aim, the great life purpose. Here is where power originates. The deed must first live in the thought, or it will never be a reality, and a strong, vigorous concept of the thing we want to do is a tremendous initial step. A thought that is timidly born will be timidly executed. There must be vigor of conception or an indifferent execution. All the greatest achievements in the world began in longing, in dreamings and hopings which for a time were nursed in despair, with no light in sight. This longing kept the courage up and made self-sacrifice easier until the thing dreamed of, the mental vision, was realized. According to your faith be it unto you. Our faith is a very good measure of what we get out of life. The man of weak faith gets little, the man of mighty faith gets much. The very intensity of your confidence in your ability to do the thing you attempt is definitely related to the degree of your achievement. If we were to analyze the marvelous successes of many of our self-made men, we should find that when they first started out in active life, they held the confident, vigorous, persistent thought of and belief in their ability to accomplish what they had undertaken. Their mental attitude was set so stubbornly toward their goal that the doubts and fears which dog and hinder and frighten the man who holds a low estimate of himself, who asks, demands, and expects but little, of or for himself, got out of their path, and the world made way for them. We are very apt to think of men who have been unusually successful in any line as greatly favored by fortune, and we try to account for it in all sorts of ways but the right one. The fact is that their success represents their expectations of themselves, the sum of their creative, positive, habitual thinking. It is their mental attitude outpictured and made tangible in their environment. They have wrought, created, what they have and what they are out of their constructive thought and their unquenchable faith in themselves. We must not only believe we can succeed, but we must believe it with all our hearts. We must have a positive conviction that we can attain success. No lukewarm energy or indifferent ambition ever accomplished anything. There must be vigor in our expectation, in our faith, in our determination, in our endeavor. We must resolve with the energy that does things. Not only must the desire for the thing we long for be kept uppermost, but there must be strongly concentrated intensity of effort to attain our object. As it is the fierceness of the heat that melts the iron ore and makes it possible to weld it or mold it into shape, as it is the intensity of the electrical force that dissolves the diamond, the hardest known substance, so it is the concentrated aim, the invincible purpose, that wins success. Nothing was ever accomplished by a half-hearted desire. Many people make a very poor showing in life, because there is no vim, no vigor in their efforts. Their resolutions are spineless, there is no backbone in their endeavor, no grit in their ambition. One must have that determination which never looks back and which knows no defeat, that resolution which burns all bridges behind it and is willing to risk everything upon the effort. When a man ceases to believe in himself, gives up the fight, you cannot do much for him except to try to restore what he has lost, his self-faith, and to get out of his head the idea that there is a fate which tosses him hither and thither, a mysterious destiny which decides things whether he will or not. You cannot do much with him until he comprehends that he is bigger than any fate, that he has within himself a power mightier than any force outside of him. One reason why the careers of most of us are so pinched and narrow is because we do not have a large faith in ourselves and in our power to accomplish. We are held back by too much caution. We are timid about venturing. We are not bold enough. Whatever we long for, yearn for, struggle for, and hold persistently in the mind, we tend to become just in exact proportion to the intensity and persistence of the thought. We think ourselves into smallness, into inferiority by thinking downward. We ought to think upward, then we would reach the heights where superiority dwells. The man whose mind is set firmly toward achievement does not appropriate success, he is success. Self-confidence is not egotism. It is knowledge, and it comes from the consciousness of possessing the ability requisite for what one undertakes. Civilization today rests upon self-confidence. A firm self-faith helps a man to project himself with a force that is almost irresistible. A balancer, a doubter, has no projectile power. If he starts at all, he moves with uncertainty. There is no vigor in his initiative, no positiveness in his energy. There is a great difference between a man who thinks that perhaps he can do, or who will try to do a thing, and a man who knows he can do it, who is bound to do it, who feels within himself a pulsating power, an irresistible force, equal to any emergency. This difference between uncertainty and certainty, between vacillation and decision, between the man who wavers and the man who decides things, between I hope to and I can, between I'll try and I will, This little difference measures the distance between weakness and power, between mediocrity and excellence, between commonness and superiority. The man who does things must be able to project himself with a mighty force, to fling the whole weight of his being into his work, ever gathering momentum against the obstacles which confront him. Every issue must be met wholly, unhesitatingly. He cannot do this with a wavering, doubting, unstable mind. The fact that a man believes implicitly that he can do what may seem impossible or very difficult to others, shows that there is something within him that makes him equal to the work he has undertaken. Faith unites man with the infinite, and no one can accomplish great things in life unless he works in oneness with the infinite. When a man lives so near to the Supreme that the divine presence is felt all the time, then he is in a position to express power. There is nothing which will multiply one's ability like self-faith. It can make a one-talent man a success, while a 10-talent man without it would fail. Faith walks on the mountain tops, hence its superior vision. It sees what is invisible to those who follow in the valleys. It was the sustaining power of a mighty self-faith that enabled Columbus to bear the jeers and imputations of the Spanish cabinet, that sustained him when his sailors were in mutiny and he was at their mercy in a little vessel on an unknown sea, that enabled him to hold steadily to his purpose, entering in his diary day after day, "This day we sailed west, which was our course." It was this self-faith which gave courage and determination to Fulton to attempt his first trip up the Hudson in the Clermont, before thousands of his fellow citizens, who had gathered to howl and jeer at his expected failure. He believed he could do the thing he attempted though the whole world was against him. What miracles self-confidence has wrought! What impossible deeds it has helped to perform! It took Dewey past cannons, torpedoes, and mines to victory at Manila Bay. It carried Farragut, lashed to the rigging, past the defenses of the enemy in Mobile Bay. It led Nelson and Grant to victory. It has been the great tonic in the world of invention, discovery, and art. It has won 1,000 triumphs in war and science which were deemed impossible by doubters and the faint-hearted. Self-faith has been the miracle worker of the ages. It has enabled the inventor and the discoverer to go on and on amidst troubles and trials which otherwise would have utterly disheartened them. It has held innumerable heroes to their tasks until the glorious deeds were accomplished. The only inferiority in us is what we put into ourselves. If only we better understood our divinity, we should all have this larger faith which is the distinction of the brave soul. We think ourselves into smallness. Were we to think upward, we should reach the heights where superiority dwells. Perhaps there is no other one thing which keeps so many people back as their low estimate of themselves. They are more handicapped by their limiting thought, by their foolish convictions of inefficiency, than by almost anything else, for there is no power in the universe that can help a man do a thing when he thinks he cannot do it. Self-faith must lead the way. You cannot go beyond the limits you set for yourself. It is one of the most difficult things to a mortal to really believe in his own bigness, in his own grandeur, to believe that his yearnings and hungerings and aspirations for higher, nobler things have any basis in reality or any real, ultimate end. But they are, in fact, the signs of ability to match them, of power to make them real. They are the stirrings of the divinity within us, the call to something better, to go higher. No man gets very far in the world or expresses great power until self-faith is born in him, until he catches a glimpse of his higher, nobler self, until he realizes that his ambition, his aspiration, are proofs of his ability to reach the ideal which haunts him. The Creator would not have mocked us with a yearning for infinite achievement without giving us the ability and the opportunity for realizing it, any more than he would have mocked the wild birds with an instinct to fly south in the winter without giving them a sunny south to match the instinct. The cause of whatever comes to you in life is within you. There is where it is created. The thing you long for and work for comes to you because your thought has created it, because there is something inside you that attracts it. It comes because there is an affinity within you for it. Your own comes to you, is always seeking you. Whenever you see a person who has been unusually successful in any field, remember that he has usually thought himself into his position. His mental attitude and energy have created it. What he stands for in his community has come from his attitude toward life, toward his fellow men, toward his vocation, toward himself. Above all else, it is the outcome of his self-faith, of his inward vision of himself, the result of his estimate of his powers and possibilities. The men who have done the great things in the world have been profound believers in themselves. If I could give the young people of America but one word of advice, it would be this: believe in yourself with all your might. That is, believe that your destiny is inside of you, that there is a power within you which, if awakened, aroused, developed, and matched with honest effort, will not only make a noble man or woman of you, but will also make you successful and happy. All through the Bible we find emphasized the miracle-working power of faith. Faith in himself indicates that a man has a glimpse of forces within him which either annihilate the obstacles in the way, or make them seem insignificant in comparison with his ability to overcome them. Faith opens the door that enables us to look into the soul's limitless possibilities and reveal such powers there, such unconquerable forces, that we are not only encouraged to go on, but feel a great consciousness of added power because we have touched omnipotence and gotten a glimpse of the great source of things. Faith is that something within us which does not guess, but knows. It knows because it sees what our coarser selves, our animal natures, cannot see. It is the prophet within us, the divine messenger appointed to accompany man through life to guide and direct and encourage him. It gives him a glimpse of his possibilities to keep him from losing heart, from quitting his upward life struggle. Our faith knows because it sees what we cannot see. It sees resources, powers, potencies which our doubts and fears veil from us. Faith is assured, is never afraid, because it sees the way out, sees the solution of its problem. It has dipped in the realms of our finer life, our higher and diviner kingdom. All things are possible to him who has faith, because faith sees, recognizes the power that means accomplishment. If we had faith in God and in ourselves, we could remove all mountains of difficulty, and our lives would be one triumphal march to the goal of our ambition. If we had faith enough, we could cure all our ills and accomplish the maximum of our possibilities. Faith never fails. It is a miracle worker. It looks beyond all boundaries, transcends all limitations, penetrates all obstacles, and sees the goal. It is doubt and fear, timidity and cowardice, that hold us down and keep us in mediocrity, doing petty things when we are capable of sublime deeds. If we had faith enough, we should travel Godward infinitely faster than we do. The time will come when every human being will have unbounded faith and will live the life triumphant. Then there will be no poverty in the world, no failures, and the discords of life will all vanish. You've been listening to Pushing to the Front by Orison Swett Marden, Part 8. Thank you for joining the Winner's Voice. Part 9 will be available in the next video. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more powerful audiobooks.